All right. Cool. Well, folks, we're going to get it started. I know it's Wednesday afternoon, 1 o'clock. It's a little odd time that a couple of us who doesn't have job or who doesn't have to work at the desk is doing this session for us. So the recording will be available on the Facebook, and as always, we'll be sending the recorded session out to our mailing list of a couple hundred people. So hopefully for you guys who's watching the recording, you're envious of what we're doing over here. It is the last segment of the Surviving COVID webinar because we thought we're all sick of it. No pun intended. So we want to kind of segue away from here with a lighthearted session because this is a topic I've been wanting to cover for a while. And of course, we're not going to go away. So unfortunately, if you're hoping we're just going away, we're not going away. We're starting new webinar series next, or basically at the end of July. So we'll continue on once a month investment focused series. And also we're going to start releasing some of great My Story interviews where I interview folks who has reached their financial independence, who own successful small business. So be releasing that once a week as well to our audience. So really looking forward to that. But today we want to demystify the van life. Essentially taking the cue from, with the coronavirus, I think a lot of international travel is very limited because even if we want to travel to these countries, these borders are closed to us. And also flying in the airplane got some people very unsettled. So RV sales has been going through roofs, national statistics wise. So we thought about, hey, why not taking a prolonged trips? Because for us, as some of you guys know, we reached our FI last year. So we wanted to take a prolonged trip with our 2 kids onto the road, visiting our beautiful national parks and etc. So as I was kind of talking about that, I met Sarah and Joe, and both of them are currently living our dream lifestyle. So Joe's been on the road for over 3 years. I don't know how long. How long have you been on the road, Joe?
It's about a little over 2 years. So I think we're at 2 years and about 3 or 4 months, something like that.
That's awesome. So that's a very long time. And then Sarah's been on the road, well, in the van for a little bit, but she's been in Australia nonetheless in the van life over there. But she's also traveled over 40 countries. In her life, and then she's working remotely during all that time. So I think with 2 of our experts over here, we're gonna get this van life demystified today. So welcome guests today. We're gonna have a pretty interactive session. So housekeeping things, if you're joining us on Facebook Live, we may not get to your questions over there because I can't monitor two things at the same time. Can't multitask. But if you join us, but you have a link over there to join us on the registered webinar forum, and then you can ask us Q&As in our live sessions over here. And for folks who join us over here, put your question in Q&A, ask away from these guys, like what do you all need to get on this lifestyle? Awesome. Hi. So cool. So let's kind of get this started. Joe, can you tell us, Joe and Sarah would take turns. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and kind of your lifestyle, and just give us some backgrounds on like how this kind of works with you? Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been a part of the Seattle Investors Club with Julie Clark for, maybe like 6 or 7 years now, where we have investor meetups that have currently changed into online investor meetups. We've also done a combination of like wholesales, rehabs, and that type of thing. And then over the last couple of years since I've moved into the van, things have morphed a little bit into focusing on fitness. And I have a fitness group called the Get Better Project, which focuses on at-home and on-the-road fitness that people could do. If people are watching, you can see we pretty much have our setup right there with a couple of dumbbells and a mat. And that is what has been our fitness program for the last couple of years. So spend time doing that and having fun on the road.
Yeah, so Joe has a very successful business that teaching people how to work out anywhere, anytime. So he's going to show us maybe some push-ups later. Um, and Sarah, tell us a lot about your adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been working remotely for the last 5 years. Normally, I would have a home and I'd go on 2 to 4 month trips. So still slow traveling at that time. But December 2018, I decided to give up my home base. And so I've been calling myself home baseless. I'm never home, but always home baseless. So for the last, what is that, 20 months, I've been living out of my backpack. And then the last 4 months, I have been living out of a van here in New Zealand.
Nice, nice. And it's
Yeah.
stuck in New Zealand currently, right? And not planet.
Yeah, I came here very much on purpose. I assumed, I took an educated guess that they would handle the virus really well. And boy, did I guess correctly, because they have essentially eradicated or contained the virus. And we are all able to live free here, and quote unquote normally, without face masks, without worrying about the virus, because all of the cases are 100% contained.
Awesome.
And then what I do for a living is I work for a real estate brokerage based in Seattle. I actually have never even been to Seattle, but because everything we do is remote. And so we're a referral based brokerage helping investors like you buy in places they don't live, all across the country. And so I do everything that I do remotely from my computer wherever I am around the world.
That's awesome. And that's agents invest, right? And then addicted to ROI.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep. And yeah, and like Joe, we had in-person meetups, but with coronavirus and everything, we've really pivoted to doing things virtually. And we actually started a mastermind, the ROI Inner Circle, focused on buy and hold investors. And that's been really, really wonderful.
That's awesome. Awesome. So take us back, you guys. What kind of inspired you to kind of have this lifestyle? Just kind of like, what got you like thinking about doing this?
Well, for me, it was just dreaming big and always having that in the back of my head. And when I started dating Emily, we wanted to dream big together. And one of the things that we really loved was getting out into nature. And we thought, well, we've both traveled abroad quite a bit, but we haven't seen the United States. So let's set a big goal of going to all the national parks. And that led us to not only going to the national parks, but why don't we figure out if we can go to them all at once and see what that looks like.
Yeah.
So, 3 years later, we figured out how to become completely remote and then buy this customized van based off of what we wanted out of our, daily life, hit the road. And originally it was going to be a year, and then it moved into, 2+ years without any kind of end in sight.
How many national parks have you covered?
We're at somewhere around 55 or 56, and when we started out, there was 59. So there's a couple of them that are out in the middle of the ocean that are hard to get to, but we're getting pretty darn close.
Nice. That's awesome.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, almost done. That's
yeah,
awesome.
then we'll move on to Canada.
Nice.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's
if
that's
they'll
good.
let us in.
Yeah, go during the summer though, if you can. Unless if you're going snowboarding and stuff. Things gets a little treacherous.
That's a topic we could get into if you wanted to. Winter van lifing.
Yeah, definitely.
It is winter here right now, and I am cold in the van.
Yes.
Nice.
And then what about you, Sarah? What kind of inspired you going on this van life specifically in New Zealand out of all the places?
Yeah, it's funny. I wish I had some great aha moment, but really it's just been something I've been into for years. I mean, when I got the van, I of course posted on Instagram, and my best friend and college roommate, Bridget, she was like, "Oh my gosh, you've been talking about this for years." And I
Yeah.
kind of was like, oh, have I? I didn't really know that it was, but clearly it's been a goal of mine for a really long time.
That's awesome. So finally realizing it.
Yeah.
And you know, for me too personally, I've wanted to do a painting on site at all the national parks, Joe. Knowing that you're doing a push-up at each national parks, I'm thinking this may go longer than like just a year that what we planned it on.
Yeah,
So yeah,
it's addicting. Watch out.
yeah. So
Yes,
so
amen.
yeah, so kind of doing that, you know, now you have an idea. Walk us through how did you, what's the first step? Someone wants to start doing the RV lives or the van life. What's the first step for them to kind of decide? I'm guessing vehicle is probably the first thing they need to research on.
Well, I think that, Sarah and I might have some completely different answers here, which is going to be really fun. So
Yeah.
for me, the first step was just kind of like writing out what that was going to all look like. I'm a big visual person. So I, wanted to know, all right, step one, I'm going to have to make sure I can either have a, income from somewhere, whether or not that's, passive income, or I'm going to have to work somewhere. And then step two, what is that going to look like for us, right? Are we going to be in a big van or a massive RV, or how does that all look? So I tried to plan it out as much as possible and then do research from there. And that was the first step for me.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah, and mine was more of a situational. I came to New Zealand because of COVID, and New Zealand is kind of made for this. There's apps that tell you exactly where you can park. There's lots of public toilets,
Wow.
public showers, public campgrounds. It's really designed for traveling by van. Sometimes when I pull into a parking or like a campsite, there are 30 other vans or RVs alongside me. And
Wow.
that's obviously right now where tourism is at an all-time low because most of the tourists left and returned home. And so the country's really made for this. And so mine was very spontaneous. I actually landed in the New Zealand airport. Immigration was taking extra long because of the precautions with COVID. And I opened my phone, got on Facebook Marketplace, made an appointment to meet a backpacker that evening, and I bought the van that day.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I would never do that if I was in America. And so that is not what I'm advising. But I think it can be really planned out, but it can also be like you just need to pull the trigger and buy something. The really cool thing with New Zealand is that I bought this thinking that my visa was 90 days and that at the end of 90 days I would turn around and sell it. I bought it from a Dutch backpacking couple who did the exact same thing. They bought it 90 days earlier and they were selling it the week that they were flying out. If I was doing this in America, I'd put a lot more thought into it because Joe, I'm sure you can attest to this. You drive a lot longer distances there than I ever will here in New Zealand. And so my needs are different here than they would be if I was back in the States.
That's good thoughts. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about you, Joe. Like, I know you spent a lot of time on this van build out. Walk us through a little bit about how you, and I see you have your van in the back there. So, walk us through a little bit about your build out. And for someone who's interested in kind of building out super out their vehicle, what are kind of like the steps or procedures to kind of do that?
Yeah, so the easy way would be to figure out somebody like an outfitter that is selling a van, if that van is what you wanted to go with. And also another note, if somebody wanted to figure that out, I highly recommend renting something because there are vans just like mine that you can rent and get a feeling for it. At the time when we were getting into it, there wasn't as many vans available as there are now. And long story short, but we were able to get onto a TV show that let us drive one of these vans, and that solidified what we wanted. If anybody wants to go and see an old TV show with Emily on it, look up Car Matchmaker. But yeah, as far as van goes, I think it starts with like what size do you want and what do you want to do with this. Our major concern or thing that we want to make sure of is that we didn't need a lot of space, but we wanted it to be comfortable and we wanted it to be 4-wheel drive so that we could drive, in very snowy places and or off-road and get off the grid. Then we decided on the pop top here which allows us to have more space in a smaller vehicle. So it's the smallest van that we could, Sprinter van that we could get. And when we pop the top, you'll see, I'll walk you guys into it, that it breeds a whole bunch of headroom in here when you go up into the van.
Nice.
Which was great for someone like me who's 6'1", so I can stand up here really easily. And you can see up top is actually the bed that drops down to where my head is when we sleep, and there's a little ladder. And then in the back here, we have what would be like our hangout / workstation. So that is also a second bed, as well as there's water underneath there. I have my standing desk set up right here. That's how I usually roll with that. And then we do have a bathroom and shower right here, that is actually storage right now, which is an interesting topic to have, because Emily's must-have was a bathroom and a shower inside the van. Mine was kind of like, I don't really care, whatever. And we've used it a couple of times. It's really nice when you're like in a parking lot or something and you want to take a shower, and or you're not wanting to go into the Walmart or something like that, or wherever you're at. But we've probably only used it, 10 or 15 times as far as the bathroom goes, and the shower maybe twice that.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I would do the shower again. But to walk you guys through, like, after you figure out what you want, then you have options of just going and buying one and trying to get on the list, or taking the long way around like we did, where you order the van and then you have somebody design it for you, like to the exact specs that you want. So like we designed and had help with designing everything, like from, we got, we want bamboo. We were really, high maintenance when it came to the design process, which you can or you can't be. And if anybody has any specific questions that we don't get to, feel free to contact me, because I know that this can be quite the process if you're thinking of building a high maintenance van like we are.
Right. Or maybe RV, like for a family of 4, maybe we were thinking about buying an old RV and maybe like somewhat souped it up. Laundry, for example, was one thing that was on our list, because was specific with Corona stuff. I'm like, it'd be nice to have a laundry within your unit and whatnot. Yeah. So looking back on this, so you obviously talked about, hey, you wish that you actually don't have the shower. You didn't really need the shower, but like just driving this whole van for 2 years now, like what are some stuff that you would say, hey, I wanted to, like, I wish that we had this. And I wished, obviously you talked about, I wish that we didn't have this, but what you would have wished, like a kind of like a luxury items to be added there.
Yeah, because of the amount of research that we did up front, there's not a lot of things that I'd say, man, I wish I would have done this different. The one major thing that we've come to the conclusion with is adding more solar. So I'd recommend, if you want to be off grid and not have to plug in and be able to cook full meals and whatnot, like we cook with an Instant Pot. We have a induction stovetop, and we can burn through power pretty quickly. And we have 200 watts of solar up top that will help us power that on a nice day like today. But if I were to redo it, I would redo by adding at least 400 watts. So doubling that solar power, and being able to also potentially adding something like a generator, which we're probably going to do in the future anyway. But because of the upfront research, there's not a lot that we would end up changing about the van, other than like we might do like a pan shower that would kind of like have a screen that would come out so you could put it away when you're not using the shower. That would just end up giving you more square footage. But it kind of depends on what your needs and wants are. If that's important to have like complete privacy, and that might not be the best for you. And if you're going to RV, you're probably going to get a lot of that. And we have an outdoor shower too, so we can shower in multiple places. But yeah, it's not a lot that I would change per se, because we do have a lot of cool luxuries that worked out really nicely.
Yeah, gotcha. And what about you, Sarah? What do you wish you had on the van, and what do you wish you did not have?
Yeah, well, if I kind of feel like, so I bought this van, but I kind of feel like I did what Joe recommended. I kind of feel like I'm test driving this van so that I can make a wish list for the van that I'll have when I likely move back to the States.
Mm-hmm.
And similar to Joe, I want the smallest Sprinter that I can have, just so that I can kind of look a little more incognito, and you can drive in the city and visit friends and park outside their house. I do want to be able to stand up in mine. I'm not 6 foot, but I want someone that is 6 foot to be able to stand in mine. I definitely want a better dedicated workspace. I had this like dream that I would be spending time outside in a chair in the sunshine. And the reality is that like weather happens. And
Right.
so I know most of your audience is in the Seattle area. Like when it's rainy, you're trapped inside the van, like you're not
Right.
leaving.
Yeah.
And so having a really cozy workspace would be a must have. And then I don't have a toilet, and so definitely I want a toilet. I agree with Joe. I don't think I need a shower. It's funny the way that your life is just different than it is when you live in a house. And so you're probably going to campsites or you're going to gyms, and there's actually a lot of different ways that you can have a really nice warm shower. I too have an outdoor shower with mine that I have currently. And yeah, I'm getting really excited about it. I'm liking the van way more than I thought I would. I thought the inconveniences or the lack of luxuries may be uncomfortable, or doing it alone may be really lonely. But like I said, I'm meeting so many people. And I think that that's the one thing that our RVers in the US are surprised by, is that there's kind of like this little underground community of RV folk who, like Joe and I, we love being outdoors, we love travel, and we both probably have really different reasons for why we like this life. But the RV community is a really cool community and a great way to meet people.
That's awesome. And you talked about before, both of you talked about test driving it. Obviously, getting onto a TV show will be a higher bar over here. But, like what are some other sites that people who wants to try this out can go and try this out by renting it?
Yeah, there's a website called outdoorsy.com. And it's folks like Joe and other people that own RVs or campers or travel trailers, and they rent it out to you kind of like Airbnb. And so that's a really great way to try it.
That's awesome. And then Joe, to your earlier point about design, having the different firms to kind of design it, do you have some links or website you can kind of recommend that for someone who wants to build their own van, where they should kind of look into?
Yeah, I mean, it's most convenient if you can find somebody that's local to you so that you can really sit down with the people. We had a great experience with Momentum Vans up in Arlington, Washington.
Yeah.
And we actually dealt with a lot of different van companies. We interviewed like 5 different companies before we went forward with this, and got really lucky and still communicate with the Momentum Van guys. And I even recommend that if anybody has questions, even if they're not going to go with them, they're so knowledgeable and so like friendly that compared to what I've run into with other companies, that they'll just give you straight up answers and be like, yeah, that will work, or that won't work, or that's what this is going to cost you, kind of a thing. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
That's awesome. And I see that you're wearing their shirt today.
I promote the heck out of them.
Yeah, intentionally over there. That's awesome. So, and just kind of asking about like, how much would this cost, right? Obviously, if everyone wants to have different RVs, I've looked into it. So on my research is you can probably get a pretty decent, but an old one for about $15K to anywhere to the diesel pusher, which is like really gigantic ones. And they have showers, they have laundry machines in there, all that sort of stuff for like $150K probably. So it really kind of depends on the styles. You both mentioned about the size of the van, and you both intentionally choose the van versus the RV. Can you tell us a little bit about, I think Sarah, you touched on this a little bit too, but Joe, like what was kind of reasons why you choose this size?
Yeah, I'm with Sarah on that. I did not want to have to drive a large vehicle in cities. I wanted to be able to go to friends' houses and park on the street. and camp there. I wanted to be small enough that I could get into like Forest Service campgrounds. And you see a lot of RVs when you're out driving around. We didn't necessarily know this beforehand, but they can't get into a lot of places that we can go just from a convenience standpoint. And that can have to do with the width and the length of your vehicle and whether or not it's, higher up off the ground. So if you have more ground clearance. But I wanted something that was going to be more like a minivan and less like a RV, and the driving conditions of that. Because I don't know about you, but I don't love driving a huge vehicle down the road.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to get my husband to drive most of the way.
Personal driver, I like it.
Yes, but he doesn't know. Don't tell him. But yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I have to echo that. I think that the ability, I think everyone has had this experience where everyone for the most part has been on a road trip, and you've been driving down the road and you see something, and you or your co-pilot is like, oh, turn, go over there.
Yeah.
You can't do that if you're pulling a 30-foot, 27-foot trailer. You can't do that if it's an RV. Whereas Joe and I have the ability to veer off when we see something cool, or squeeze into a parking spot because everyone recommends that we check out this brewery or this restaurant when we drive through Salt Lake City. And I want to have the ability to park wherever I want.
Gotcha. So that's good, because that's something I haven't considered, as I now have to think about getting maybe a smaller RV or a Class C, something that has like a stack it up and then whatnot. That's
I
awesome.
think the pro of the travel trailer is that you can detach the travel trailer and then you have your vehicle. So that's a really good option for families. Because I don't know about you, Joe, but I don't think I'd want my partner and 2 kids in my van. And so it's a different need set.
And I have a funny story of that too. We've had a couple times we've had 2 people visit us and bunk in the van because we have the ability to sleep 4, and it's tolerable for about 3 days maybe.
Yes. Gotcha. Yeah, because I think a Class C or something, and then obviously towing is kind of another challenge by itself. Like, I'm not a very good driver, so my husband's kind of rejecting that because he's like, then I'm 100% the driver. He's not signing up for that, but we'll see. That's awesome. Now, you speak about the power system and all the other stuff. So as you kind of embarking on the trip, what are the things that you either researched ahead of time or you think are essentials, like someone who's going on the trip who's never kind of gone this should kind of take a note of and maybe do some research ahead of time?
Well, I think that there's going to be certain things that you are going to want that are like non-negotiables, and it's really good to have those set up. Like for us, the non-negotiables were to have not as large, but a big enough fridge to have a week's worth of food that we could keep with us at all times. And that has worked out really well for us. It was also to be able to cook. So we have, like I said, we have an instant pot and we have a stovetop that we can cook in. So that was a non-negotiable. Then we had to be able to work. So we needed to have the electrical system sufficient for that, as well as water. So we have 20 gallons of fresh water, and we actually have gray water as well. But I guess as a note, something that I didn't mention earlier is like, if you can get as much water as you can get without feeling like the weight is too much for the vehicle, that would be something I would definitely research, because there's this play on like, all right, 20 gallons is great, but even with 20 gallons of water full, you can feel a little difference in the van when it's full up on gas and water than if you don't have that. So weight is a big consideration when you're even driving a small vehicle like a van, or major consideration when you're doing a bigger vehicle like a massive RV.
Gotcha. And then even for RV, it's like you can't take endless showers either, right? Because the gallon's always smaller and it doesn't refill. That's the thing. Yeah. Like my daughter just takes forever long showers that she has to change some habits over there. Yeah, definitely. So, and then other things like, power and, electricity, as you guys mentioned a little bit about before. Sarah, what is your solution on electricity? Because I know Joe had the solar power that kind of helped him. But for your van, what is the kind of situation with the power? Yeah.
Yep, so this van is doing it on the cheap. I bought this van for 5,000 US
Wow.
dollars. Yeah, and it was completely converted out. I posted pictures on Instagram so everyone can see. It's actually really nice and really cute. Is it fancy? No. But do I have power? Yes. It is a external battery that is then connected to an inverter, and I can plug in as normal. I think I drained the battery after 5 days, and I work from my computer. I'm on my computer for 9 hours a day. So the computer was almost always plugged in. And then having external battery packs are essential. I'm actually using it right now to charge my AirPods, because you never know. I always joke that a shower and power are the two things that you start to really appreciate when you go into van life. So you never pass up a power outlet and a hot shower.
Nice.
Just out of curiosity, because I know now they have these rapid charge thing. That would these things work with like power for the van as well?
I don't
So,
know, not as far as I know, but maybe Sarah knows more.
Yeah, well, there's just a lot of things to consider. Like you can get power packs that are solar, you can get power packs that are 45 watts, so they actually charge your phone faster. So I have one of those so that if I do work from a cafe, I'm at the outlet power charging everything. So there's just lots of like creative ways to get power. But a lot of your listeners are likely not going to be off grid as much as Joe and I are. And so power actually doesn't really become that big of a concern, because if you're parking at an RV park, you're going to have power and free Wi-Fi, probably every night.
Free
It's
Wi-Fi.
only for those, it's only those times that you're going on BML land or going off grid, which I imagine not very many people are actually doing for prolonged periods of time.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I could say that with my setup too, like and the solar, I'm talking about running out of power if we're using like heavy amounts of like cooking. Otherwise, like Sarah said, that I could charge for my computer forever. Like I could sit in here forever with 200 watts of solar and charge it. Like it's never running out. So
Right. Gotcha. And then water, like as you mentioned about before about water. So obviously going on van life is going to be a little challenging than the RV, but for RV, you should also fill up too, right? So like never pass the water, never pass the power. I guess that's the case. And then for someone who wants to go on van life, because we know we have a few students in EasyFIU who's thinking about this. So for them, do you know, like what are kind of your source of power and your source, like how do you just go to people's shop and just be like, can I plug it in? I guess that doesn't quite work, right? But like what are sources of like power if you needed to plug in, and then a source of water? I'm guessing not like bottled water, so I'm guessing like a big jug of water or whatnot as you fill up.
That's a great question. So our battery system recharges itself from either the alternator or from the solar or from shore power, which is plugging into someone's house or an RV hookup or something like that. So I would say that even in the first 2 years, if we didn't include the winter camping, we only plugged in once, I think. Once we got into meaning to shore power to somebody's house or, an RV outlet. Once we got into winter and there was less solar available in the winter, then we plugged in quite often when we were at campgrounds. And it pretty much all depends on there's all kinds of different ways. You start to see plugs when you're walking around. It's like you see things that become of interest to you. You start to see plugs and you see hoses. So you'll be like cruising around and you'll stop to go to the bathroom and you'll be like, oh, look, there's a clean water spigot right there. How we doing on our water? And you'll just, get an RV filter, plug it in and fill her up. It's much easier in the summer months or the warm months than the winter months. It's almost like a complete different conversation, in fact, where you're going to get water and electricity in the winter than it is in the summer. It's much easier in the summer.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Yep,
That's
I agree. I haven't plugged in once. I actually don't even have the ability. My battery charges when I drive.
Oh, okay. From the inverter, from the gas to yeah, gotcha. Okay. Awesome. So kind of switch gear a little bit. I know the lifestyle that we choose allows us to kind of support this type of, I guess the work that we choose allows us to have this lifestyle. So tell us a little bit more about like your working to kind of work remotely as well, taking these prolonged trips and working remotely. Because even if for some of us who reached the FI, we still are doing our own stuff, like running our own business and whatnot. So what are some essentials that you needed for facilitating kind of working remotely?
Yeah, so the first thing for me was making sure that, or I should say us, is making sure that we had internet connection. So
Mm,
figuring out what our plan was for having internet connection. And that was tricky depending on which part of at least the United States or I guess the world that you're going to be in.
mm,
And for us, we researched all kinds of different things. And I'm really interested here if Sarah has any kind of cool solutions for this, because we're still working on the ideal internet setup, especially for someone like me that does a lot of videos and needs to upload massive amounts of data.
right.
If you don't need massive amounts of data, it's much easier, but we mostly will use our cell phone hotspots, and we have an additional iPad, which gets us an additional 15 gigabytes of hotspot juice on the LTE network. And then we have a strategy, we call it our 3 coffee shop strategy, which we're not really sure how that's going to go down in the COVID times.
Mm,
But what we would do is we would have 3 different coffee shops that we would scout out the day before that we knew that we were going to go and hit up. And if the first one had enough internet speed, then that would be great. If not, we would just go and check it. We wouldn't buy anything, and we'd go right to the next coffee shop
mhm,
and see what that took. And that could include coffee shops, libraries. Whole Foods are fantastic for fast internet. Other grocery stores you can get internet in. There's all kinds of little hacks. And there are a couple of apps that are okay at telling you where those particular things are.
mhm,
There's one called Work Hard Anywhere. I believe it's called WHA, that is not bad. It can tell you internet speeds and things like that.
mhm,
Um, and then there's all kinds of other solutions that you can get into, from like what we have, which is the cell phones, to more advanced systems like what the police use and the fire use in order to have like multiple SIM cards that will give you internet on different networks and have an antenna that sticks up from your vehicle and
mm.
boosts your signal and all that fun stuff. So
Gotcha.
that's how we work on it.
Awesome. And Sarah, what is your solution to like kind of internet is probably the biggest thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I love all of these questions because they seem like really big problems, but then once you dive in and do it, you're like, oh, this is like not that hard. So my cell phone is my personal hotspot, and I've only ran into trouble probably about twice
Mhm,
in the last 4 months. And again, like Joe, it's only when I'm doing video. So if your life is just email and browsing the internet, then this is not even a concern at all. You're always gonna have enough juice. I will say if I had a partner, I would have him have a different cell phone plan. So in the US, maybe one of us would have AT&T and T and the other would have Verizon.
mhm,
I've noticed that there has been moments where I don't have as much data here in New Zealand using Spark, which is kind of the equivalent of Verizon. And I've thought, oh, it would be really nice to have another SIM card.
mhm,
And then if you want to, I mean, you can spend a lot of time and money on Wi-Fi boosters and satellite things, but I personally think it's one of those things like get on the road and after 2 weeks, reassess what your actual need list is rather than be spinning your wheels preparing for something that may never actually happen.
mhm. And the
Yeah, and
other, yeah, go ahead,
oh, real
Joe.
quick, I just wanted to echo what Sarah said there. Huge tip that she brought up that I didn't mention was, if you have 2 people, get different cell phone services if you need to be
Mhm,
working, because I have Verizon, Emily has AT&T, and that has saved our
Yeah.
butt so many times.
nice. That's awesome. And Sarah,
Yeah. And
since
Joe, have you been in a situation where you're like, babe, you need to get off the internet. You need like more juice. Like I've been in that situation when I was in South America. I'd have to be like, everybody get off the Wi-Fi. Like I have a really important call. And my boyfriend at the time would be like, okay, fine. And he'd go to the gym or go on a run because he couldn't get on the internet at the same time.
Yep.
Funny.
Van life problems.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. And so I have a plan that is with Google Fi. This is the kind of question to Sarah and Joe too, which is, you know, originally when I got on Google Fi, the idea was I can travel 70 countries without having to, because I have to answer calls and etc. So after my research, that was the only plan that allows me to tag onto different networks, etc. So can you kind of comment on would a Google Fi, like a network kind of plan, work for that, or
yeah, that would work great when you're traveling internationally. This is something I have done a lot of research on because I do think this is really important. And it's funny, in the back of my Clear phone is all of my different SIM cards from all of these different countries.
Nice.
And so if you're doing Google Fi, then you don't need to do this. But I've opted to do this, meaning get a local SIM card when I go to a country, because I find the internet to be just a little bit more reliable. I do think Google Fi is great. And again, if I was traveling internationally with a partner, I'd probably have him do Google Fi and I would get the local SIM card. But both are really good solutions. I personally have opted to do local SIM because I find it a little bit cheaper and I love saving money.
That's awesome. And then if I travel in US, then could I use a Google Fi? And then what would be one network that you would suggest my spouse to have?
I like Verizon in the US.
Verizon.
Yeah, probably Verizon. It kind of depends on where you're gonna be. It's really hit or miss. You could go find a map though, which are not going to be incredibly accurate. They like to tell you they're accurate, but they're not really accurate. And just kind of compare based off of where you think you're going to be driving. So you could see like the blue AT&T service area versus the red Verizon. And I would say that it's either Verizon or AT&T, but probably Verizon.
Yeah, because I think Google Fi uses T-Mobile, and that actually probably includes Verizon. So maybe for that reason. Oh, sorry, not Verizon, the AT&T and T-Mobile. I have to kind of double check that. Well, awesome. So things like, so that covers kind of the working part of it. And so last question I have over here is, what is your kind of next venture? Like in terms of the van life? Actually, I have more questions. Like there's actually one quick question I have, which is the weather. So you talk about weather and the van, it's kind of somewhat insulated, better than the tent, but still, like, what are you doing when you're going into a very hot area in the summer, like Arizona, like you can't even walk outside. And in the vehicle, you would be even hotter. So what are some solutions over there? And then also in the winter when it's like a super cold.
Good question. For in super hot conditions, we drive away.
Okay. So no going to Death Valley in the middle of summer.
No, not really. We tried going to Joshua Tree right off the bat when we got our van, and we got cooked. And basically, in our experience, you get a little bit more comfortable with getting uncomfortable in all kinds of different weathers. And I joke with a buddy who was really into taking like cold baths and cold showers. And as a fitness nut, I'm into that as well. But I joke with him about like when it's van life, you're exposing yourself to so many different temperatures constantly that it's almost like doing that without having to do it.
Yeah, I got it. So you get used to it. Yeah. And Sarah, since you're in the winter over there, what are you doing with the weather over there when it's in the winter?
I wear a lot of layers. So I booked into a bed and breakfast because I have this video call now and I have another video call this afternoon. So I am booked in a bed and breakfast. And so I'm finding what works for me and my happiness is to do the van for probably about 4 to 6 days. And then about every 7th day, I check into a bed and breakfast to warm up and get a little bit of luxury. But frankly, I think I was telling someone, you almost need to be like mentally strong when you're doing van life. And I don't want to paint this picture that it's like incredibly rugged and we're like out in the tent in the wild. But I will say like, it's not always comfortable. And for me, it's just constantly putting myself in positions or situations where I'm reminded why I'm doing this. So for example, I think I was telling you earlier, like I was sitting in my van with all the windows open, listening to the ocean. And I was actually parked next to a Belgium couple. We have kind of been going like this, traveling together. And they're like, Sarah, come quick, come quick. And so I was working, answering emails. So I shut my computer, I run outside, and there was a seal sunbathing on the ocean. And it just was one of those moments where I was like, this is why I'm doing this.
Right.
Like the sunsets and the sunrises and all of the like beautiful things that you get to see on the road. That's why you're doing this. And like the little things, like the uncomfortable moments where I can see my breath inside of the van.
That's
in the
awesome.
morning. Like I don't love that, but there's a reason that I'm doing it. And
Yeah.
the reason is bigger than the uncomfortable moments.
Gotcha. So it's also kind of like a lifestyle that you choose, right, over there too. Yeah, and that kind of like it goes with the spirits, like, because if you're just going after the comfort, you might as well just stay at home or something like that. Which is why we kind of get on the road. It's the adventure, both in the uncomfortableness and also the adventure part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. So the other thought I just had was also potentially you may want to use your partners when you're working remotely. So if you have a partner on the deal that is not traveling with you, and hiring out, just having the folks who actually have steady internet to do the video uploads, I guess, would potentially work. But of course, if you're doing content and all that sort of stuff, you have to be there. So that's part of that too. That's awesome. Well, you guys taught me a lot about the van life. So last question I have is, what is next? What is the next adventure for you guys?
Ooh-wee. Our next adventure is going to be driving slowly to Arizona, doing a 2-week full paddle raft trip, and then playing around down in the Southwest area and riding mountain bikes until wintertime, when we're planning on chasing snow again for the winter. Because although it's really uncomfortable in the winter, there's some beauty to being out there when it's nice and cold.
That's awesome. And do you snowboard or do all these activities as well?
Yeah, and that was, we had never tried doing that, and it kind of seems like van life would be harder in the winter. And there are some things that you have to consider, like exactly what Sarah was saying. You get, every once in a while we'd get uncomfortable and we go get a hotel or something like that. But the ability, if you like snowboarding, if you like skiing, if that's something that you really enjoy, you can chase storms around, you can show up in parking lots, you can pop up and be the first on the mountain, you can have epic powder days. So that was probably my favorite thing that I've done in the van so far. Even though you have some really cold nights and things break more in the cold, you get to be out in this epic, amazing environment constantly.
That's awesome. And Sarah, what about you?
Oh, I don't know. COVID has really, I know a lot of people have missed vacations but mine is more of, I mean, my entire lifestyle has changed. I think after my visa ends here in New Zealand, my American passport isn't going to get me into very many countries. And so I'm having to kind of rethink what my entire life looks like. Because normally I'm popping from country to country. Last year, I think I visited 16 different countries on 3 continents. And now my life just looks totally different. And so it's too early to tell. My visa here is extended until September. But I have a lot of different plan Bs and different scenarios. And I know that if I do move back to the States, the very first thing I'm going to do is buy a Sprinter van.
That's awesome. So, because you test drive it, right? So that's all it matters. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and thanks guys for tuning in to our last episodes on this. We will have Joe and Sarah to check out where you're at. Can you tell us where we can find you?
Yeah, so I'm at the Get Better Project for my fitness company, or the Fantastic Life for anything van related.
That's awesome. And then we'll put that And Joe, you're gonna put that cross tag onto the same post on live on our live Facebook stuff with that link. That would be awesome. And Sarah, where can we find you?
Yeah, on Instagram, like any good millennial, and my Instagram is Sarah D. Weaver, and I'll be sure to put it in the comments as well.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And we haven't seen Joe doing the push-up. Joe, do you want to do a push-up for us?
Do you want push-ups or something more fancy like a handstand walk?
Oh yeah, we
Oh
want to see a
yeah,
handstand walk.
Handstand walk.
All right, here we go. Hopefully I don't
I guess get into the sunset because this is our last episode, but we will come back. Next episode will be last week of July.
Right.
We're going to have to cover the infinite banking concept, which is something that people have requested us to do for a while from whole life insurance. All right, now we're looking at Joe doing a handstand
I can't hear you
walk.
for some reason. Headphones are gone.
Oh wow, this is amazing. Awesome.
Incredible.
That is incredible.
Yeah, Joe and his van are incredible.
Yes. That's awesome, Joe.
Did you get it?
Yeah, we got it. Yes.
Nailed it.
Thank you so much, Joe. And if you want to be as fit as Joe, check out the link on our Facebook, and I'll send this out onto the MailChimp as well. And thank you so much for today's session again. It was really fun.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.